All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Frontline Fridays, where we dive into the hearts and minds of leaders who elevate retail and their teams to greatness. What is their secret sauce? And we are here to find out. This show is brought to you by YOOBIC, the AI-powered mobile app that gives frontline teams the performance tools they need to communicate, learn, and work right in the palm of their hand. And I'm Ron Thurston, and I will guide you on this journey of a great conversation today. I'm the author of a book called Retail Pride and the co-founder of a company called Aussie, where we're reimagining retail recruiting. Go to useaussie.com, that's USEOSSY, to learn more. So I'm very excited to introduce my guest today. Kate Sargent is a seasoned executive with over 20 years in people operations, organizational development, talent acquisition, and D2C strategy within mission-driven retail and CPG companies. She's the founder of KJS Career Coaching and Talent Consulting and a top LinkedIn executive coach, and has spent 8 years supporting leadership and career advising. Kate's currently expanding her offerings as a co-founder of a community-centric consulting collective with a give back model. We're going to talk more about that. Her recent roles include VP of People Ops at the Citizenry, leading through its acquisition by Havenly and scaling global talent acquisition and DEI functions through, global talent acquisition and
It's a
DEIB
mouthful.
at Allbirds. And she also built Methods global talent acquisition and DE functions through SC Johnson's acquisition and managed the talent acquisition for retail and corporate at VF Outdoor. But one of the reasons why I love Kate is because she came from stores and had field leadership roles at Apple, Bare Essentials, L'Occitane, and American Eagle Outfitters. Known for strategic insight and thoughtful leadership, Kate drives business and operational strategy through people with a unique blend of humor, empathy, and inclusivity. So Kate, welcome to Frontline Fridays.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you on the show. I know you and I met, which is funny, through a company, not a company, but an organization called Women in Retail Tech. And I'm not a
Yeah.
woman in retail tech, but you are. And I guess I'm an ally in that organization, and I'm a proud member of Women in Retail Tech. And so that's where we met, and I'm excited to know you.
Same. I think we'd been connected for years and years, and I saw you in there, and you'll hear through my advice here that, take the shot, reach out, say hi. So that's what I
There
did.
you go. Then as soon as we chatted, I knew I need to have you on the show. So let's take you through this idea of talk to us about the basics of coaching, because your career through stores and leading initiatives and talent acquisition has led you to a place where you're really offering coaching, advice, mentorship to people on their journeys. So take us through just the basics of coaching, and then I want to go deeper.
Yeah, so for me, it was a matter of I started out with friends and trying to really help them through the process because it feels like a very difficult, challenging process if you're not on the back end of it. Feels like there's a lot of secrets, there's a lot of special things that you have to do. And so I just really wanted to kind of demystify that experience of getting hired as someone who was on the back end of it for so long. And for me, that journey from retail into corporate into coaching felt like a really natural progression. I ran retail stores for years, worked as district leadership, wound up doing retail recruiting, then corporate recruiting. And for me, well, going into sort of the people function and being able to coach people, develop teams, develop organizations was a natural fit for getting into that more individual side of things to help people navigate a really unpleasant process sometimes.
Right. And what's your general sense of what people are experiencing today?
Yeah, I would say that the market feels crunchy is a kind of a nicer word to put it, I think, right now. There's a lack of consideration. There's a lack of response that people are getting that feels a little bit different. I would say 2.5 years ago, we really had a candidate centric recruiting, robust hiring going on. And the recruiters were tired. We were tired of chasing after the candidates, and they were kind of ghosting us. And it was a little bit miserable being on the recruiting side because people would come to the table with 6 or 7 offers or make you wait or ghost in the process. And now it seems like the tables have kind of turned because the market's a little bit tighter. There's a lot of people out there on the market. So, as things constrict, people get a little bit less willing to see people who want to pivot. They get a little bit less willing to respond back, give feedback. And ultimately, there's, 700 people in every application process because we've made it so simple to apply at this point, and people are, sort of strategically using AI to get their resumes in places and over applying. So a lot of times there's a lot to cut through in this market to make sure that you're able to get seen. And for that matter, get into an interview process and get through an interview process. I would say the biggest frustration and the thing I hear the most out in the market right now is people just getting into a interview process and then it just falling apart. Did the job close? Did no one respond to them? Were they not the right fit? Did they make it to the final round and get no feedback as to why? Did they do a big project and give a ton of work away for free? And then that frustration of, oh, I spent so many hours in this process only to not make it to the end. So I would say the frustration of the time, the lack of response, and this sort of shift from a candidate market to a employer slash HR slash recruiting market is really challenging for people, especially when they've been laid off.
Right. And in that kind of the spirit of the basics, what are, say, 2 or 3 things people that are searching can do like today to help navigate that?
Yeah, I would say one, get a coach. It doesn't have to be me, but find somebody in your network or find somebody in your mentorship world that's willing to be honest with you about how you're positioning yourself, getting your resume straight, making sure that your LinkedIn is set up. And all of those things center around really knowing who you are and where you are in your process, as well as getting really organized. And then that's where a coach really helps you figure out what that process looks like, understand what's on the other side of that and what people are actually asking for and looking for. People have a tendency to really want to just give all the information they possibly can because they hold it tight. I did all this work. I want everyone to know about it. But a coach can help you navigate what actually somebody wants to hear on the other side of that. It's curated, it's bespoke, it's a packaging of yourself.
Interesting. So let's go into just that as you're acquiring a new client. Talk us through kind of the intake of that, the questions that you're asking. If someone listening was preparing to have you as a coach, what would that journey look like?
Well, the first thing is making sure there's a connection because, similar to a therapist, you want to make sure it's somebody that you're going to trust. There's a lot of emotion involved in coaching. There's a lot of really direct feedback that happens. So making sure there's a connection is one of the first pieces, and why we do free initial consults is so that you can make sure that makes sense. And then a lot of times too, it's about setting expectations in the market. There's a lot of coaches out there that are, I'm going to get you a job in 30 to 90 days. I don't know anyone who can actually do that right now. And, if you get to that point really quickly, great, that's wonderful. But I don't necessarily think there's an ability to promise something like that in a market right now. So making sure that people are understanding and having the right expectations about what a process looks like. And then really understanding their needs. Are they reaching? Are they moving laterally? Are they wanting to get into a different industry and pivot? What is their expertise and can I help them? There's been situations too where I'm not the right coach for you. There's some areas where I'm not as deep as somebody would want. My connections aren't as deep. My outreach won't be as deep. Where I've, sort of sent people to other spaces too. So making sure that I'm going to be the right person that can deliver. And then making sure for me that people are willing to do homework. I've created packages and I've got homework that people need to do in between so that they maximize the time and make the most of their time with me. So I think setting expectations, making sure people have reasonable goals, and then understanding what that end goal looks like is the most important for like setting up coaching.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's all incredibly valuable. Often recruiters offer some of what you're describing, but not all. And so I think great executive search at senior levels can be part of this, but you're also talking about stores and people who want to go from stores to corporate. And that actually requires a whole different level of homework, skill set of communication, how to translate your skills, and kind of talk about applicable competencies from stores to corporate. So I'm
Yes.
imagining it's also a lot of unraveling and mock interviewing and things like that, because you may be entering a job market that's different than the one you were working in for the last decade, for example.
Totally. And I would say, if we want to talk about that retail to corporate transition quickly here,
Mhm.
it's a difficult transition to make. I made it myself. People were not nice to me in the process. They consistently told me that my retail experience wasn't what they were looking for in corporate jobs or in the pivots that I was trying to go through. It sucked. It hurt my feelings, and I felt like no one really understood the work that I was doing. But I learned how the system worked, and I learned the type of things that I needed to do. And some of the things that exist in this space of making a pivot are things that I can help people with, right? Which one of them is the language. When you get into a corporate office, that language is different than it is in the sort of retail side of things. Or maybe you're not even in a retail corporate office, you're in a different office entirely, but there's a language that exists, and I think people don't understand each other in these conversations. The hiring managers will say to their recruiters they only have retail in their background without any sort of understanding of what that actually means. So the impetus is on a lot of times the store leader to explain their experience, package their experience in a way that somebody who works on the corporate side who's never been in stores understands the application, the transferable skills, that sort of thing. It's not about telling people everything that you've done, as I mentioned. It's about figuring out the way to package those skills so that somebody else on the other side can really understand it. And to
Right.
your point of executive recruiters and people who recruit, they understand pieces of that. But also, if you haven't worked on the retail side and you don't understand the breadth of skill set, the different functionalities, like a retail store leader is a finance person, a recruiter, a, visual expert, a diffuser of conflict, a people developer. There's so
Yeah.
many different pieces that exist in the retail universe that folks in the corporate office who've gone very narrow first really don't understand how they would apply in those particular roles. So I think
Mhm.
from a coaching perspective, retail folks are great clients for coaching because I think there's
Great.
a really great opportunity to help them make that transition. But I will say it's sad to me. I don't get a ton of retail store leaders. I mean, I have quite a few, sort of district and multi-unit leaders, but I want to see store managers. That's who I want to help. I
Yeah.
love store leaders. I was a store leader and I was not taken seriously, but I can help you get there. So I think like that's the value of trying to figure out like I've worked in the corporate office, I worked in the retail side of things, and I was a hiring manager for both and a recruiter for both. So like it's every aspect of how to get through that process.
Yeah, and your advice as a coach is extremely valuable because of that.
I
It's
think
very
so.
insightful. I mean, I can tell that it is because the value received by the client, is only as actionable as the honest advice that you give and the
When
honest.
people won't tell you the truth, oh, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you, but like people won't
Yeah,
tell you the truth. Recruiters
right.
aren't going to tell you the truth. That's the story. Like it's really difficult to be a recruiter when someone asks you for feedback and be able to give them the truth because sometimes the truth is they just didn't like you. Sometimes the truth is they just didn't understand your skills. And when you're a recruiter, it's a really difficult position to be in when people are asking you for coaching advice because you have that obligation to a client. Whereas a coach is a third party that doesn't have that sort of attachment to, anyone but you really trying to get
Right.
you through that process.
Right. Exactly right. And if there's no recruiter or mediator, then it's even harder
Oh,
because then it's
yes.
ghosting, then it's, well, thank you, but no, and there's no feedback because the risk is too high. And so how do
Yep.
you have clients that are experiencing that? There's no recruiter mediator. Where are you managing that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say that definitely is one of those things where it's like, those mock interviews that you were talking about before, those mock interviews are tremendously valuable. We'll sit and I'll be your recruiter. I'll be the hiring manager, I'll be the recruiter, and I'll walk you through an actual interview. And you would be shocked at how different you sound to somebody else than you think you sound. So I think I'm willing to give the feedback. I'm willing to give the direct feedback. I'm willing to say, no, that was terrible and you need to do it again in a very nice and kind way, of course. But I mean, you're not going to get that elsewhere. And I think like, whether it's me or whether it's a family member who's going to be honest with you, going through that process and getting the feedback that you didn't get from the hiring manager, that you didn't get from the recruiter,
Yeah.
is as useful as you can kind of make it. You can never really know what was in somebody's head or why you didn't get a job. And frankly, you can't always believe what they tell you if they did give you feedback too. I mean, I've had to package feedback that was really negative before and put it in a palatable way so that someone didn't come back and say, no, you're wrong. I am better at that. I can do that. So I think, a coach is somebody that you can argue with. Like you can say, no, 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 this is what I meant. And I can say, no, 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 that's not what you sounded like.
Mhm.
So I think there's a value to that sort of honest relationship that exists in coaching too.
Yeah, agreed. And through the kind of difficulty of the last year or two around layoffs and teams becoming smaller, and whether
Hmm.
that's in field teams, corporate teams, we are functioning in our industry with smaller teams. And so
Yeah.
when you're coaching someone who's gone through a layoff, and and you talk about layoff trauma, how does
Yeah.
that feel? Like, what's some of your coaching advice that someone that's experienced that?
Yeah. Layoffs are, they talk about your business driving you versus you driving your business a lot of times. And I think coaching was very much like that for me. I'm a super action oriented person. I'm not sure if you can tell from my energy level, but I always want to get right to the solution. Let's figure it out, which again is a retail characteristic too.
That's
Like
a
we don't
retail
have time.
leader. You come from
We don't
stores.
have time. We don't
Okay.
have time to figure this out. We got to solve the problem right now. So I approached my coaching in that direction. And what I've learned over time is there's this sensitivity in this layoff space where you really do just have to take a step back. I want to provide as much value and get people moving as fast as possible. But what I've started doing is adding this sort of crafting your narrative. Let's take a step back and figure out the story that also exists with this like layoff trauma of grief. There's a grief that exists in layoffs. And I've experienced it myself. I know what it feels like. It feels like you're no good anymore, and you're not. That's wrong. You're just as valuable. Did a podcast with Roy from Noto Group a while back, and he said to me, "You're just as valuable on the day you were laid off as the day before. There's nothing has changed other than your job." And I think reminding people of that is really, really important, and just sitting in it for a second and allowing them to tell the story honestly, that because like you might be posturing for your coworkers or your friends, or you don't want to hurt your family with like your emotional state. Like a coach is a give it to me, I'll take it,
Yeah.
right? Like let me remind you of why you're a badass, why you're a cool
Right.
person, like this everything that's on your resume and everything that's on your LinkedIn and everything you talk about in your interview process is your story of how amazing you are. So I think going through the process of taking the time crafting that information and like nurturing it, I don't want to sound cheesy, but like
Mhm.
nurturing that information within yourself is tremendously valuable. So I think for me it's about grief. So that what's the 3 C's of grief? It's like connect, I can't remember what they are right now, but like
Yeah,
the
I don't
three
know.
C's of grief are really, really important. And it's about like figuring it out within yourself, figuring it out within your, smaller community, and then putting yourself back out there. And so for
Yeah.
me, I like to help you pick it back up. Let's pick you back together. Let's like get you speaking with power again, and then let's approach the job search. Because if you go out and you just start applying, you're not doing it in a thoughtful way. You're
No.
not really like that desperation becomes palpable. People feel it. You're not your best self when you get into those interviews if you can't speak about yourself with power and value. And I think, taking that step back and getting somebody there is really important in that layoff trauma.
I would agree. The other piece, and kind of I want to move into this, coaching advice of things that nobody tell you, and I'll start with one that relates
Okay.
to this, because I think we often in retail are so connected to each other. Words like family are thrown around,
Mm,
and that you feel so, because you're engaging with a brand's customer every day. And so your emotional attachments to brands, and you're selling it every day, and you're immersed in a brand. You're doing visual merchandising, you're hiring people, you're speaking about the brand, which is very different than corporate experiences. You're not selling the brand every day when you work in finance. you're doing your job. And so when those layoffs happen, what I've discovered is they're even more emotionally traumatized, and the lack of understanding that they are literally like a personal financial center, and you were just a line item that was too expensive, and therefore you needed to go, is really hard to wrap your head around. And I find people in field roles to be that much more traumatized because they don't understand. Corporate layoffs feel like a downsizing of a department.
Mhm.
Store closures, layoffs in stores, the trauma feels deeper. That's just my own experience. So I would love your thoughts on that, because when I say, you know what, they actually didn't care, you were just a cost center that needed to be eliminated, that's hard to hear.
Yeah, and I think, you get sort of callous to it as you get older in some way too. Like you
Yeah.
experience things, you go through time, and you understand those things. And I think, but yes, you get attached. Like there's a reason that you decided to work for that company. There's a reason you decided to stay at that company, whether it's the brand or whether it's the people. And usually it's a combination of both. So that when somebody tells you you can't do that anymore, it's like, no, man, I gave my heart and soul to this. These are my people. This is my brand. This is what I stand for. This is my ethos. And I think that hurts, but I mean, I think layoffs hurt in general, right? As much as we don't want to, name the puppy, like, you have to kind of get invested to be good at your job, I think. I mean, that's my personal belief. I think you have to be invested to be good at your job. And, I think there's a level of protection that you need to have, as you continue to grow your career, in that it could end at any moment. We're going to be a great employee while we're here. They're going to be a great company while they're a great company. And when we need to make that clean break, it's a clean break. You
Yeah.
need to be able to get there. But to your point of layoffs feeling a little bit more personal, like store teams feel like family in a different kind of way than a corporate office. And I've had incredible teams in both places. But you're in the trenches day to day. You've got people. I remember working at Steve Madden, people throwing shoes at me because I wouldn't return their shoes. And like, those were my people. Those are the people that called mall
Right.
security when I was in trouble, right? Like, those are your people that you hired that supported you. And we all know it's a tough world together. And we all decided and we held hands and said, we're going to do this together. So I do think there's an element of that. But that doesn't mean you have to lose those people. That's kind of my take. You don't have to lose your love for a brand because they had to make a company decision.
Yep.
You just need to know going in that that's going to happen. You can still love the brand, you can still love the people. And frankly, you should keep in touch with those people because they're going to be great for your network in future. They're going to be the people that you sit down and have coffee and or wine with and complain about the layoff that happened. And they're going to be the ones that lift you up when they get into their next role. Show that gratitude, that altruism of when
Yeah.
you get into a good place. Those are the people that are going to be your first degree connections and help you in your next role. That's my take.
Right.
So I'm
And
like,
help
get
you
involved,
promote.
get connected, but not to companies. Be there, be a great employee for companies, be a great employee for your managers, be a great employee for your brands. But when it's over, that like it's always at will employment. It's, like it's a tenuous relationship always.
Always. And so when you think about that kind of the lines that you draw, what advice do you give, or people that are maybe don't always hear about self-promotion and personal brands, and these kind of buzzwords around, even though you're employed, you're
Yes.
building a personal brand. Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think
I
you
mean,
have
I think
one,
this
I
is
have one. We've worked hard to build personal brands.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think this one's really important to me. The personal brand, the build yourself up and make sure that you're telling your story. My whole coaching centers around telling your story, right? Being able to tell your story in writing, being able to tell your story externally in interviews, resumes, bios, like whatever you're doing, being able to tell your story. And I think PR for yourself is what I call it, is getting other people to tell your story. And in order to be able to do that, you have to understand who you are, what you do, what your positioning is, and what you're trying to get to first. So you need to figure that out and understand what it is. Because people that are all over the place, nobody's doing great PR for those people. It's the people who are centered, understand what they do, have something to offer, and are helpful to their other coworkers, adding value, and get other people talking about you. To me, that's like the biggest piece of advice, like the coaching advice no one tells you, is get other people to talk about how great you are.
Mm.
Because it means more when they do, like when somebody tells you about a product, you think about it that way, right? When somebody tells you about a terrible product, you pay attention a little bit more. So you need more people to talk about a good product for it to really catch. And it's the same for people, and I think the best way to develop a good personal brand is to add value to other people's work. Like, are you a great cross-functional partner? Maybe. Are you seeking feedback to find out? Maybe not. So, I mean, I would say, asking for feedback is a really important part of getting good PR for yourself too, because people might be thinking something totally different about you that you didn't even realize. But, you could be like, I'm open to feedback. But unless you ask directly for feedback, people usually aren't going to give you constructive feedback unless they are required to as part of their job. So I would say use your connections in your role, use the people in your life, and really listen to what you're hearing. And then, make sure that what you're adding to everybody else's world is something that like they're going to be talking about. Your HR person is one other thing that I want to mention here too. When you're in your organization, I know there's everyone's giving hate to HR people right now for sure. That's fine. I will defend them to the death because HR is a hard place to work in.
Hard. No, I will too.
Um, yeah, but I mean, there's awful HR people too. I'm just going to be honest. That's true. But for the most part, it's a really difficult role. But we're also here to help you. And if you treat us adversarially,
Mhm.
we live in that space too. But we can also live in the space of when those promotion conversations happen. Who's sitting in the meeting with your boss? It's an HR person, most
Yeah.
likely. They're going to be at the table. They're going to be sitting in those conversations. So I would say talk to your HR person. We love coaching. Please come to us with something that isn't a problem, right? Come to us with something where we can help you and we can actually help grow your career. So I'd say also on that end, of being good PR for yourself, work with the people that are in your organization that could help you.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts around that advice around sharing where you want to go, what you want to do? Because sometimes that also
Yeah.
stops. You're telling your manager, but depending on their skill, may not. So maybe it's your HR partner, maybe it's senior leadership.
Hmm.
What's that advice around managing your own career and not waiting
Yeah.
to do it for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much advice there. I'll just try and lean into a couple of different pieces there, but I would say look outside of your role. Like people get really insulated in like, am I doing a good job within my role? But it's also about like, what else can I do? Like asking what else versus like, oh, I'm doing enough. And not to say that everyone isn't doing three jobs right now and there's not enough people and you're super busy, but if you have a goal, you need to know what the steps are to get there, and you need to find yourself in positions that you can get some like experience in those places. I'm a big believer in doing work for free. Not that people shouldn't be paid for their work, but like if you want something, go out and get it. If you can't get it in your current role, go find a volunteer
Yeah.
situation out in a nonprofit that's going to give you that that's going to give you that experience. People aren't usually saying no to free work, right? It's also a place where you can fail fast and learn things.
Yeah.
Go get the experience that you need in a class somewhere if your company's not providing it for you. Like go find it yourself if no one else is providing it for you. Make mentors outside of your company. Shoot your shot. Reach out and say, "Hey, I
Yeah.
love your product. I'd love to, like talk to you at some point in the near future and, get advice about the type of work you're doing." But I think, again, all of that centers around really knowing who you are, what you bring to the table, and where you're going so that you can
Mhm.
make those connections and build those steps to get yourself there.
Mhm. And and part of that again maybe coaching advice that no one's giving you about like, well, actually, what do you want to do? And what brings you joy, or what are you actually really good at? Maybe joy is not the right way to
Yeah,
describe it,
right.
but like, what are you good at and you're confident in that builds what are those steps to move forward? Within corporate environments, store environments, the transition to both. I find that often people don't actually understand what their strengths are.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you when I go into these mock interviews with people too, and people are like, well, which strength do you want me to talk about? And I'm like, give me all of them. Like, let's figure out what you're actually, feeling in that space. But to your point though, like, I love art very much. I am not an artist and I will never be one. So there's like a level of self-awareness too that at some point you have to have. It's like, the reason that I got into recruiting, true story, is I was really terrible at visual merchandising. I had no eye for it. I was awful. I hated doing it. And I had these really phenomenal store teams though. And so people would come into my store and be like, your visuals are amazing. And I was like, that's because I hired this wonderful person who I recognize the strength of visual merchandising in, right? Like it has nothing to do with me other than my ability to hire that person and know what they're good at. And so I would say find that space too, right? Like if you're not good at something, find the adjacency that you are good at that you can do. One of the people I work with, my partner Bridget, she worked in art and she loves art and she loves art history, but she wound up in logistics and process management because she is a freaking rock star at that, right? And she did it in that space. So, figure out what the thing is that you can add to the table so that you can still do the things that you're passionate about, but find your strength in that space so that you don't feel like a fish out of water when you're trying to do the thing you love, but you're not good at it. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it absolutely does. You're right. And how to articulate it, how to add language where it makes sense, all of it. And so I guess we're out of time. We have a lot to talk about, but the kind of final thoughts about kind of you and what you do and why it's valuable, and maybe a couple nuggets of advice, and then where people can find you.
Yeah, well, so I'm easy to find. I'm all over LinkedIn. I'm posting all the time, so come check me out on LinkedIn. And you can find my coaching and consulting company is just KJS Consulting. And just to note for the viewers and listeners out there, I also offer like if somebody mentions this podcast, I have a really nice referral pricing if somebody wants to come in and try out coaching. But I also offer my initial session for free. So definitely get into my Calendly and book one out. They book out pretty far, but like come in and get a 20-minute free session. Retail store leaders too, especially, I want to see you. And then I'm offering $75 off for referral pricing for any hours of coaching that people want to do as well. But yeah, you can find me around. And I would say some pieces of quick nuggets of advice right now is that put a call to action on your LinkedIn profile. Put something on there that says, I want to network, I want to do outreach, and leave it evergreen on your profile. It's a way, it's a trigger, it's a signal to people out there that you might be open to something without saying, I want a job, or I need another job, or not the job that I'm currently in. So I would say put something on your LinkedIn profile that leaves you open to networking and conversations. I'd love to chat with great people in this world. I'd love to chat with great people in doing innovative things in the retail industry. Put something on there that's a call to action so that people know that you're open to that sort of thing, and respond to everyone. Respond to recruiters, respond to everyone, whether it's a no, whether it's not a no, like respond in LinkedIn and make sure that you are active as possible on there, because that's what gets you noticed and that's what gets you, conversations.
Could not agree more.
Right? And shoot your shot. Come say
Shoot your
hi. Get
shot.
into a recruiter's inbox. We might get 25 people a day doing that. Sorry, recruiters. I know you're probably like, please stop doing that. But, if you go into an ATS with 700 people, the odds are not as good. If you go into a recruiter's inbox and say, hey, totally know you're busy, but give them a disclaimer to get out of it if they don't respond. Totally know you're busy, but would love for you to look at my resume that I put in for this role. 1 in 25 is better odds than 1 in 700. So I would say use your network, use the people that are out there for you. And when you get laid off or you're down, go find the ones that love you. Find the ones that know how great you are and spend some time with them in your networking process. So those are, I've got 700 pages of advice. Please come to me. Please ask me. But those are the ones that I feel like are really helpful for right now.
Amazing. Well, you're a incredible wealth of knowledge, energy, enthusiasm, insight,
Thanks, Ron.
all those words. And I'm really happy to know you and have you as a resource that I can also send, people that are looking for additional things outside of traditional just job placement. Like they actually really need you. And I believe that to be true, and not just in job search, but in life. People need
Oh,
a person around you to help you move forward. When I've had the opportunities to have a personal coach, they've changed my life. And I could not support this idea more.
I'm here for it. Come and like change my life too. Like
Yeah,
it's a two-way street here. I've learned so much from everybody that I've talked to. So come in and change my life too. Let's keep it
amazing.
going. But I'm always out here if somebody needs something or if somebody's having a day that they just can't get through. DM me in LinkedIn. I'm happy to help. So
Great. Thank you. Such a pleasure. Thank you.
yeah, thank you for having me. This has been so much fun.
Good. So I will be back in 2 weeks on July 12th with Lance Orso, who is a GM of a Harley Davidson store in Dallas. Lance and I were on stage together a few weeks ago, and I said, I don't know anyone that rides Harley Davidson, but you need to share this story. So I'm excited to have Lance on the show in a couple of weeks. Be sure to follow YOOBIC on LinkedIn for show details, or go to yoobic.com. And there's a whole page dedicated to this podcast where you can find every episode in all of your favorite channels and more details about every guest. And if you're searching for next generation communication, micro learning, and task management tools to guide your frontline teams in the future, check out what YOOBIC can do. Click the link in the comments. And with that, have a great weekend, everyone. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks again, Kate.
Thank you.